there. So I have to confess, while we're gathering, that bless me, sisters, for I have sinned. I have background envy of Maria and Allison. So usually when I'm showing my video, when I have something for work, I use a fake background because Microsoft Teams will do that for you. Had I sat where I usually sit, you would have seen such exciting things on my big yellow pad as Dr. Lee, ? Laura and Rose, San Antonio, and the ever-popular groceries, Costco. So I decided to have a different backdrop than I did this morning, which was just basic, boring white. Four of these guys we bought for A Future with Hope a few years ago. I like to call it Popes of My Life. And hopefully you recognize them all. John the 23rd, Francis, John Paul II, and of course Paul VI. But who's that guy in the middle, you might be asking? Yes, indeed, it is Justin Bieber. We used to have remember back when we could go to malls? There's a mall near my apartment, and my sister was out of town and had a pretty rigorous trip, and the music store was closing, and so they had a life-size cutout of Justin Bieber for like $10, and I decided it would be really funny for her to come home to that, and indeed it did make her laugh. And it was right about the time Biebs was getting arrested, right after he'd been arrested, so we put his arrest date in Miami there. I know Biebs isn't Catholic, but I thought maybe he'd give you a little bit of a laugh, and goodness knows he needs all of our prayers, right? So yeah, thanks, Mary. It could indeed be Gladys Knight and the Popes. And I'll post later on the page our dear friend Mary Lou Steinberg, Mary Lou Swanberg. And I kind of had a battle of the Popes at One Future with Hope. I was kind of a Paul VI fan, and she's all about JP2, but it was kind of funny. And the other thing I get to do, since I'm the last speaker of the day before our group gathering, is I too have a favorite rosary. And the story of mine is that my maternal grandmother was first generation American. Her parents were from Poland. And this is her rosary, and I really like using it because I kind of feel like I can still touch a little bit of Grandma Smith on it. I do not have my Grandma Rigney's rosary, and I wish I did because it was glow in the dark. So that was kind of fun in the day. You guys are hilarious. Anyway, so welcome back. My name is Melanie Rigney, and I really want to thank Maria and Allison for their inspiring words. I don't know about you guys, but I wrote down a whole lot of things that I want to ponder in my heart. And I'm also looking forward to our group discussion at 3:45, and I hope you'll come back for that. So I'm supposed to talk today about surprises post-40 and God. And confession number 2, I don't much like surprises. Do you? I think the last one I truly enjoyed in the moment was when Diane Davis threw me a surprise 18th birthday party. I like an ordered, predictable life. Up at 5 in the morning, start the day job at 7, coffee at 9, done with the day job at 4:30, dinner at 6, and asleep by 9. I like predictability. But I've had a whole lot of experiences post-40, a whole lot of surprises, and I'm talking beyond hot flashes, hair on my lip, brain fog, and what I call the year everything fell. Although, if you're interested in a Catholic Women's Journal on those topics, stay tuned next spring at my website. No, I'm talking about the surprises that can put our hearts and our minds and our souls out of kilter. You know the kind. Lost love, lost family and friends, lost job, lost sense of purpose and identity. Now, some of these surprises we bring on ourselves, or they're indirectly the result of something someone else does. Sometimes they're the handiwork of the evil one. Often we just don't know. So I'm going to suggest that you get out a piece of paper or open up a notepad or some other program as I talk. I don't know the surprises each of you has had since you turned 40, but I can guarantee you you've had them. And I can guarantee you that if you stop and think about it, you will find grace always resulted from God after those surprises. He seems to find a way to turn the most jarring, unpleasant things that happen to us in our lives into good. Sometimes it takes us a while to get there and to see his hand. And I've been told that's kind of what we do as women. Men tend to see God in the moment. We need to, as Mary did, ponder in our hearts. Then when we go back, we can see that God was really there all along. So the summer after that I turned 40, I spent it commuting 200 miles each way every weekend between Chicago, where my husband and I had lived for 11 years, and Indianapolis. I'd gotten a job in Indy as a book publishing manager after being fired from what I thought was my dream job in Chicago after a management change. The Indy job had a whole lot of promise to it financially, so I agreed to try it for 6 months. And I was miserable. It was a toxic work environment, dog eat dog, and my skill set was different from most of my colleagues. They didn't like that. So I kept plastering on a smile every day, applying for every job I could in Chicago, and driving really fast. Really, really fast. It was not uncommon for me to make that 200 miles in less than 3 hours. I never got a ticket, although Indiana's finest did flash their lights at me more than once across I-65 to tell me to slow down. That summer I also did develop asthma and a skin condition that included hives all over my scalp. At the end of the summer, I got a job for less money in an equally toxic environment in Chicago with a different publisher. But hey, I was back with my husband, I was back with my friends. What I didn't know at that time was that those book publishing credentials, as painful as they had been, would lead me to my true dream job, which was being editor of Writer's Digest magazine in Cincinnati. So off my husband and I went with our 3 dogs. There was no faith community to say goodbye to because my husband, who had been raised Lutheran, and I didn't go to church. Heck, we'd been married by justice of the peace. You could say maybe that our jobs were our gods. I loved the work at Writer's Digest, and it came with some really nice perks, like a business trip to Maui every year. Okay, so it was over Labor Day, but it was still Maui. And in Cincinnati, we bought a nice 4-bedroom house, 2.5 bath on 1/3 of an acre in a great school district. But my husband never really found his place in Cincinnati. He was out of work more often than not. He did find a doctor who was more than happy to give him prescription medication for his depression with no accompanying therapy. I earned the money, cooked the meals, and took care of the house and dogs. His responsibilities were to take care of the cars and manage our money. He'd been a financial planner early in our marriage. Fast forward 5 years. Writer's Digest had been sold twice to venture capitalists. I survived the first sale, but not the second. I'd always loved editing, and due to my work at WD, I knew a lot of publishers and literary agents and writers. I went to my husband and proposed that I try being a freelance editor for 6 months. Self-publishing and e-publishing were catching on, and I knew a lot about both, in addition to being a pretty good copy editor and content editor. And that was when he told me that we had more than $250,000 in credit card debt, and I needed to get a full-time job ASAP that paid at least as much as I'd made at Writer's Digest, which was twice as much as he was making. He also told me that what remained of my once robust retirement fund was now in the low 4 digits, and that we owed money to the IRS. Then he proposed we spend the next Sunday looking at new cars. You see, he liked his toys, and we both liked to travel. We'd never adjusted our lifestyle when his income took a dive. I trusted him with my money because, after all, he was a trained financial planner. Part of this mess was on him for continuing to plan trips because he thought it would please me, and part of it was on me for not being a partner in the money end of my marriage. So I took one of our dogs for a walk. I figured my best shot at some kind of life was to get me a federal job. I did not think that life would involve my husband. I did not know there was a lengthy Byzantine process to getting a federal job. I just figured it would pay decently and would be the start of rebuilding my retirement. If I'd been looking, I would have seen the hand of God all over my life at this point. I got that federal job with the Department of the Treasury, of all places, though not the IRS, and was here living a few blocks from where I live now within 6 months. And what got me that job was not my time at Writer's Digest or that other dream job. It was those 2 years in the toxic environment in Chicago. I filed for the kind of bankruptcy where you repay a good share of the debt, $103,000 in 3 years in my case. It was a godsend that my sister relocated here from Chicago, and we still live together. It was also a godsend that I had all those friends and acquaintances from all around the country who needed editors. My take-home pay from that federal government job during bankruptcy was less than $1,000 a month. Freelance editing jobs kept the lights on and my share of the groceries paid, but there really wasn't any money for entertainment most weeks. So I would get up very early every Saturday morning and walk and walk and walk. Every week I would go by this place on Fairfax Drive about 6 blocks from my apartment. I couldn't even really tell what it was from the outside, but it seemed to be a hub of activity, even on Saturday mornings. My husband and I were still wrangling over arbitration. He wanted spousal support, and I figured since he'd been able to walk away from the credit card debt, he'd been supported enough. I'd started seeing a guy here in Virginia. He said he thought I needed a therapist. So I went to one. I told her about how I'd been thinking about becoming Catholic again after decades away from the church. Because while I had problems, I had friends that had a lot more going on in their lives, and they seemed to handle everything better than I was, and the common denominator was faith. I said I thought maybe I'd get me a little Jesus to help me. I didn't think I was entitled to more than a little. Then the therapist told me about her parish. It sounded good, and it was on my way home. It turned out to be that place on Fairfax Drive that I hadn't been able to figure out, and it was unlocked. I went in and got some water. And 4 months later, I received the Eucharist for the first time in 33 years at the first Christmas Day Mass I'd ever attended in my life. Now, you might think that's the end of the story. But of course, surprises don't end just because you get you some Jesus. Following Jesus does, however, give you the strength to endure the surprises and to believe that they can be turned into blessings. 3 years after I became a practicing Catholic again, just after the bankruptcy was paid off, I'd saved enough money that my sister and I were able to take a celebration trip to Romania and Istanbul, paid in cash. As we pulled into the Istanbul train station, one of my retinas detached. It was Yom Kippur and Eid, and no specialists were to be had. I decided to stay for the rest of the week because, after all, I was already legally blind, uncorrected, but correctable, and who knew when I would ever get to Istanbul again. But I did call my prayer group. After surgeries, my vision in that eye went from legally blind, correctable, for decades, to 2015. My retina specialist says he's good, but he's not that good. To this day, he credits my prayer group. Having one eye that is 2015 and one eye that is legally blind, correctable, however, meant that fine editing was out the window. Right after the time that my livelihood dependence on fine editing ended. Coincidence? You be the judge. But I could still do manuscript evaluations, just not copy editing. And I could write, something I'd never particularly thought I was good at. I've always thought I was a lot better about helping other people sound better than writing myself. But some opportunities came my way. I started writing short reflections about the length of radio news briefs that I'd written in my first job out of college. People seemed to like them. An offer to write a page-a-day devotional for women on women's saints came along. And when I was writing it, I went to a relics exhibit. And when I held the Thecla with St. Elizabeth Ann Seton's relic in it, she said to me, "Listen and you will find your vocation." So that's what I do now. I listen to the saints and write what they tell me. It turns out they had a whole lot of surprises too, and a whole lot of faith. In my family every year, we choose words rather than make resolutions. And my word this year is trust. And I just want to show you this lovely trust earring that I got from CB Jewelry and Karen Connor, who's always been a friend of this conference. So in January, I blogged about why I had chosen this word. And I said, I hope that remembering to trust the Lord will mean less anxiety and worry this year. So it's October 17th today. And guess what? The times I've remembered to trust have been easier. The other times, well, a refresher course is always helpful, right? And God is infinitely patient. Now, perhaps you've lost a loved one this year, or been sick yourself. Perhaps you've lost a job. I think every one of us has seen our lives turned upside down in one way or another. I'm fortunate. I have a good paying federal job, and I telework. No one in my immediate family or closest circle of friends has had COVID, though friends of theirs have. Thanks to one awesome publisher, I've had 2 books come out during the pandemic and turned in a contracted manuscript for another for publication next spring. I was scheduled to offer a retreat last April, and that's on hold indefinitely. Easy decision. This conference was a far bigger trust place for me. We couldn't hold it in person, but colleagues had recommended a platform that would have allowed for group discussions and interactive time with exhibitors. Yay! The closest thing to being there, right? I read a lot of documentation, and my dear friend Colleen Kiko took a whole lot of training. We had a dress rehearsal with Maria and Allison 8 days ago, and it went down in flames. We couldn't guarantee you the quality experience you deserve. I will just say the three of them had a whole lot more trust than I did. But I got there after Colleen scraped me off the ceiling, as she so often has done in our friendship. We're refunding all the registration fees, and now we know why we were a few $100s in the black after the conference last year, so that we could do this free today, free to you. We're trusting this is what God wants, and we hope you found it valuable. For me personally, the biggest trust challenge of the year had nothing to do with COVID. On July 24th at 12:50 p.m., I was crossing a street near my house. I had my whole afternoon planned. I was going to sit outside at an outside restaurant. I had my book. I was going to have my long walk. But the street was being repaved. One lane had been asphalted twice, the other once. There was a 2-inch difference in their height, and it wasn't marked. I fell on my mouth, knocking my front 6 teeth on the top back a full inch. Oh, I saw some God in the moment. My dentist was 2 blocks away, and it was the day before her vacation started. She sent me to a nearby specialist, and my dear friend Meg dropped everything to get me there. Meg had a mass set for me. Someone else said a novena for me. Another friend prayed for me every day. But my trust was still challenged. Every night I would wake up feeling my teeth hit the pavement again. I was in a mouth splint for 5 weeks. It was difficult to talk during those 5 weeks because every time I tried to speak, the mouth splint would run across the inside of my upper lip and reopen the sore. But in the end, I ended up only needing 2 root canals and keeping all my teeth. My bottom teeth, as you can probably tell, look fine. A month ago, they were pretty much the color of the prayer shawl I'm wearing. But they're fine now. And thanks to everything that I had learned in bankruptcy, relearned in bankruptcy, about living simply, I had enough in savings to pay for all the dental work without a pinch. When I saw the specialist a few weeks ago, she remarked on my healing and said it wasn't all her skill. Like my retina specialist, she credits faith. I don't know how God is going to use this experience for good in my life, but I trust He will. God tells us in Jeremiah 29:11, "For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope." He means that. He really does. We are worth more than many, many sparrows. And sometimes the way we learn to believe that is through surprises. God is your safety net post-40. He's your safety net more than your husband or your colleagues or your children or your grandchildren or your best friends. He is your safety net even when you don't see one and even when you don't think you need one. Trust me. I hope you'll embrace your future with hope and with joy and confidence and trust. I hope you will embrace the surprise. And I think now I'm really excited. Thanks for listening to my story. It's been a textured one, is what I usually say. But I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody back at 3:45. This is the one part that I am working on. this is a trust thing for me because